you've got 21 minutes to tell this story. So you've got to save Hera. You've got to build up an emotional ending for Kanan, which they let take place over really this whole season. They build him up to this. Mm-hmm. You've still got to do it in 21 minutes. And so I think it's just so impressive what Dave Filoni pulled off with. It's animated March. So in February, we talked some of our favorite live action Star Wars episodes. In March, we're going to the cartoons, right? So we're going animated for March. I call it animated. My wife says you're watching cartoons. She's right, but it feels better when you say animations.
Yeah, we're denial.
we're starting off animated March with a banger. We're going with Jedi Knight from Star Wars Rebels. It could be the best animated episode. I think the Clone Wars, that finale arc, probably can hold its own with anything as well. But we'll talk about that too, though.
I think it probably boils down to maybe just which show you're a bigger fan of, because they're both, I mean, that last season has some phenomenal episodes.
Yeah, so, it does. It does.
But yeah. Personal
I'm
preference.
excited for it. Yeah, but today we're talking a heartbreaker. We're talking Jedi Knight and Star Wars Rebels. Now, this was one. If you know this podcast, you know this was not planned. This week is actually 7 years since Jedi Knight aired.
Is it really?
Yeah. So we filmed this. We're actually filming this in February. This is the 27th that we're filming, but the 26th or 5th, whatever, one of those two, 7 years prior is when it released on Disney XD. Is that what it's called? I mean, I only watched this like after it was on Disney Plus. So like I was not a live go at it guy, but 7 years.
That's pretty wild. It was meant to be.
Here we are, 7 years meant for 7-year-olds, and here we are talking about it. So, no, this is like some pretty deep stuff for kids. Like I could not imagine being a kid and watching this.
Yeah, tell me about it.
It'd be heartbreaking.
My nieces and nephew have really gotten into Star Wars. And they were watching Rebels at one point, and they were getting close to it, and I was like,
thanks.
Good luck.
That's a get rough. Childhood trauma.
It's there's not, and I don't know that there's another episode quite like this in any of it. Well, up till this point. I mean, there's been some after it. Like we get some pretty significant deaths in like Bad Batch, but I don't think there was anything like this in Clone Wars.
No, not until the last
where it's like
season
your main character biting the dust. Like that was So that was pretty gutsy for a kid's show.
And you got to think both of those were streaming too. Like they knew it was the weird adults like us watching that stuff. Like this was very much like kids watching this on a weeknight type of thing. Yeah. So
that's it. Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. I think like for me, I think back to like the Phantom Menace when I first watched it and like falling in love with Qui-Gon Jinn, the character, and then like watching him die at the end of the movie. Like that was a sad thing as a kid. Yeah. So that's kind of
different Star Wars.
Yeah, right. So that's probably the similar feelings. But we're gonna hop into this episode like we usually have for these past few live actions. So we're gonna just really watch through clips of the episode on screen here. We'll talk about it. I anticipate this going a little bit quicker since the episode, no commercials or anything. It's only 21 minutes, so we'll hit a few minutes of time on it. I imagine the majority of the time will be spent on that last scene, and just so impressive. Such a good episode. So we'll hop over here without further ado and get this show on the road. So a little bit of background to this episid. Now, if you've never seen Rebels, spoilers, we're about to spoil the whole thing for you.
Right now.
Yeah, it's a lot going on here. But in this episode, most things as far as Rebels goes centers around Lothal, as does this episode. So at this point, though, Thrawn is in the picture. He's the big bad at this point. You get some Tarkin interactions as well. You've got Governor Price, who is like the Dolores Umbridge of Star Wars Rebels. I don't know if you feel that way about it, but
I've never thought about that before. But
the worst.
Yeah, I think
absolute worst.
Universally hated, so probably pretty similar.
Yeah. And so you've got Hera has been captured. Right. So it's the Tide Defender project that they're trying to thwart here on Lothal. And so Hera is captured by Governor Price. Thrawn's heavily involved in this as well. And we've got the rescue mission is getting planned. So that's where we pick up here. So we've got, and I love how this starts off. So Kanan like knows what's got to happen. If you've seen, I guess, is it the episode prior where like he's talking with the wolves and they're telling him like, or it's at that after he talking to the wolves, he knows like what he's got to do. That's what he says finishing the previous episode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we get Kanan starting off here, and it's just like, I love the scenery. Oh, we jumped to the middle where I last was. Yeah. You hear the wolves. So he's hearing all these different voices. He's got Hera talking. He's got Ezra talking. He knows like exactly what he's got to be doing here as a Jedi Knight, right? So you kind of, at the very beginning of this episode, you get the picture that this is going to be a big one for Kanan.
Yeah, I mean, it opens up with just this process of he's just kind of trying to like center himself.
Yeah.
And he's, all that noise that's in his head, and then it just kind of shuts out. And like you mentioned, just the scenery is just like so calm and peaceful around him. So I do like, and I was thinking this episode, I think it's so much better as a rewatch. Not to take away like the shock and the emotional aspect of the first time watching it, but like to be able to go back through and see, knowing the end point, the journey that Kanan's on in this episode, is really cool from a rewatch perspective. And so starting the episode off with just this idea of he's really blocking out things and just centering himself for what's to come. It's a great opening for how this episode ends.
Yeah, and I do like, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, but the show on like a lot of levels telegraphs where this is going. Like you get a lot of little things here and there pointing to what's going on. But at the same time, there's some goofy stuff here and there, like what you said, that makes you think, oh, well, maybe it is going to end okay. Like it's still a kid's show on Disney.
Like you kind of have this idea. It's like, oh, well, somebody will be in danger, something crazy will happen, but they'll pull it out, right? Like that's what the show has been.
Yeah.
And it does. Like at the initial onset, it has some of that lighthearted stuff. They're still joking around. Like you're like, okay, they're going to go get Hera and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I do think in hindsight, a lot of this stuff is signaled really well, but I do think in the show, they did a really good job of hiding it and feeling like it builds up as the show goes. Like the closer you get to that point, the more uneasy you begin to feel, because there's all these little tells. The deeper you get into the episode that you're like, oh, like this is not going well. Like, so I thought it was planned out really well, paced really well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like right here, what it's about to do is you're going to get that picture of like, they focus throughout the whole episode on Kanan's eyes, right? Like they keep going there, and then like, but it'll cut to something else, and like at the end of it, that's a big deal. So like, this is one of those spots. Like it's just right before this, it's looking at his eyes, but then Ezra breaks in.
Take the lead on getting Hera back.
And then
shouldn't you be the one?
So he's telling Ezra,
I would.
You're the one who's taking the lead here to get Hera back. So he's already kind of passing off responsibility. And so before this scene, and I can scoot back just a little, or before that line, like it's focused on his eyes there. So like you go in and you just see his eyes, and then it's Ezra breaking in. You get into the Star Wars Rebels per the usual. Then we jump to Hera, and this is just kind of like the break it up type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Keep getting it going. So you've got Hera here on Lothal in the governor's office. She's getting interrogated and tortured. So you'll see this here.
Rough day.
And then Thrawn. And you forget, like, it's super cool to see Thrawn in Ahsoka. But I mean, Thrawn in Rebels is where it's at.
I love that Price. She walks in and Price just like, I haven't even asked her any questions yet. Like that's so true to Price's character. She's like, am I supposed to be interrogating her?
Yep,
just having fun torturing her.
Which is also a callback to Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
right. Where
totally.
Han's like, they didn't even ask any questions.
Yeah,
I thought this was really Thrawny here too, right? Like now, Thrawny, I can't say that because that's Diamond Fig's Will of the Force's alter ego from years past. But Thrawn here, I'd forgot about that. Thrawn here, what is this thing called? It's like a kakamori or something like that. I know that's like a slushy, but it's something like that. It's a Ryloth thing, and it was from Hera's Kalikori, yeah, not a Japanese slushy, but he's got this, and like the way Thrawn is, like when he's talking about this, I'll see where this is at for us, but
sometime in your life. This design I found most interesting, for it seems to refer to a brother.
So he's like always just pinpointing a pain point for someone. So here he's got this family thing from Ryloth from her, and it points back to her brother who has passed, right? And so he's like holding this thing she holds dear, and he's using it against her essentially. Like, I've got it now, you don't have it. And it's the most like evil Thrawn thing, because he's not like the big buff menacing bad guy. He's the mental games bad guy, and he's doing it here to a T.
Yeah, that's one of the good things they brought over from Legends Thrawn is just that, he looks at a culture, he looks at the art to understand who his enemy is. It's just such a cool thing for a plotting villain, who's not like the ruling by force and power, but like you said, just the mind games. So I think I'm glad they brought that over for his character.
Yeah, I agree. And they appear to be carrying that on in the live action too, which, I mean, I don't think Dave is going to goof up the Thrawn character. Some people complained about it some in Ahsoka, and I think there's some legit complaints just because it's almost like he was pigeonholed in there, like at the very end.
Yeah.
But he's still like in the same vein of the character. It's not like they're making a completely new character or anything.
And honestly, I would say the first season of Ahsoka really wasn't even about Thrawn. I mean, he shows up at the end and he escapes. But none of those arcs were really about him at that point. So I don't mind that he didn't get a lot of fleshing out in that.
Yeah, he was kind of the MacGuffin of Ahsoka, right? They just had to get to him, and they're going to get him to the next series. But still, I'm excited to see more Thrawn. Just a little piece there. But we jump back in here, and again, it's like only 21 minutes a show, so like it's jumping quickly back and forth and back and forth. So we've got Ezra, Sabine. They come up with their plan of what they're going to do here.
Look like loath bats. Look towards the south, where the garbage chute is. I bet we can glide right past them and never be noticed.
So their idea is a pretty good one. This is where the kid show hops in, right? So like they're going to get into Governor Price's office, and they're going to go in and essentially just get right past these loath bats or whatever. There's loath cats, loath bats, loath wolves. I love how they're all like very specific to Lothal. But that's where you get kind of the little adventuresome, non-serious thing. And they make jokes about how they're getting in the whole time. And they're perfect, right? Like, Kanan, it's good that you can't see what we're flying in.
You definitely get that banter with Zeb. He's so dubious of everything Ezra does sometimes. But it's cool too, because he's not like, no, we're not doing this. He's it's kind of a testament to Kanan giving the reins to Ezra, but they all kind of trust him at this point. But I love that Kanan lets this go, right? Like, you think back to like the Jedi attachment thing, like Kanan's obviously got some attachment to Hera, right? And so I love that they like really display his wisdom and being like, you know what, I am too close to this. Like, I can't be the one to plan this out. Like, it really ties into that whole Jedi no attachment thing. Maybe they were a little too dogmatic about it, because maybe you can make good decisions even with attachments. Anakin didn't, but that's another story.
That was didn't go as well.
This episode just does such a great job of really and clearly exhibiting all of Kanan's strengths in spite of all his doubts that he's had. So that's one of the great things about this episode.
Yeah, for sure. And so this next scene, I mean, it's iconic, right? Like this one scene here, when I think about Rebels and Kanan in general, my first thought does go to the end scene, right, of this episode. But this one's probably next, right? Like, because this is just I mean,
for sure,
it's a pretty cool scene. And so I don't know. I mean, we'll play it first, but I've got a few thoughts about it. I want to hear what you have to say. So he does this whole deal. He cuts his hair, and then we jump forward just a bit. We'll skip past them working on the little bat deal, but then he gives a shave as well.
Yeah.
And so they are preparing for their mission. At the same time, he appears to be preparing for his. I like that imagery. But at the same time, so like he's cutting his hair, shaving his beard. Did you almost, and maybe this is intended, but it's almost like a ritualistic, like almost a purification process that he's doing, right? Like it's like Old
a warrior
Testament
preparing
vibes.
for battle.
Yeah, or a warrior preparing for battle.
No,
that
definitely
type of thing.
gives that sort of vibe. And also, you know, the title of this episode, The Jedi Knight, like obviously it's with an N. You know, it's the darkness falls on this Jedi, but also, you know, Kanan never had that process, that formal Jedi ceremony of going from Padawan to Jedi Knight. So I also like this idea of the cutting of the hairs, like the cutting of the braid, right? The thing that he never did to become a Jedi Knight. So to me, it's also like him kind of finally moving past all that that he never had, that gave him so much doubt, that he's like, you know what? No, I'm like, this is what I am. I am a Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that was intentional, but I like to link it to like also the cutting of the braid and like moving past that Padawan place. So.
No, I think that's good too. And I mean, you even see it when you go to you jump ahead to Ahsoka, right? You get Sabine doing a very similar thing. And so it's almost like it is that passing of the torch. Now, obviously, she was not a Jedi Knight, but it did show that she was like ready for this next stage in her Force journey, Jedi journey, whatever. I mean, that is not as well of a told story yet as Kanan's, obviously, but it's still like that symbolism carries through. So I do like that. Now, this next part, I guess I've just like completely overlooked this. Every time I've watched this episode, I've probably watched this episode a dozen times. And it's like a Rogue One Easter egg.
It is, yeah.
Straight up Rogue One. Did this come out? So this is 2025. So 7 years ago, was it 2018? So I guess this, you know, was well after Rogue One, I suppose. So throwing it in there like that.
Nick has been quite persuasive about diverting the funding to his own project, Stardust.
The Emperor has assured me that he supports my project.
So you get Project Stardust, you get Krennic, and also I like in this that you actually get, it almost brings a third person into this budding rivalry between Krennic and Tarkin, and then you've got Thrawn, like, no, the Emperor said my projects, this TIE Defender deal and all the things I'm doing, like, that's what's better. And Tarkin's like, I think his project's a big waste of money, you know? Like, and so
Tarkin's such a punk. He's like, Krennic's, that's a waste of time. And then he's like the head of the Death Star later on.
He gets blown, like he goes down with the ship, gets blown up on it.
That's true. Yeah.
Ironic, right? But I do like that the Empire, we always look at it like it's this well-oiled war machine. Obviously it was.
Lots of infighting.
But at the same time, like every, you know, Grand Admiral, Grand Moff, weapons director, anybody with any level of status, they are not cool with anybody else within all of their levels of status. And I think that would be a cool thing. And maybe it gets explored some in Andor. There's that Reign of the Empire trilogy that's coming out. Maybe it gets explored a little bit in that. But I think there's a lot of room to really work, like to tell the story of the inner workings of the Empire that I think would be an interesting story. And this is just another little, you know, peek into that, like for 3 seconds.
Fascinating. I like the jostling and the positioning for resources and influence. Like they're all trying to get their project through. And ultimately, you know, Emperor goes with the Death Star over lots of other things because that's the fear weapon. Yeah, right. That's the thing, right?
Yeah. You know what sells movie tickets? The Death Star. That's what you got.
People love a Death Star.
People love 2 Death Stars, one even bigger than the next. They would even love a Star Killer base, it turns out. Turns out they did not. But really easy scene here. The good guys make it in, right? They're little plan works. I mean, who would have thought that it would work like a charm? They get right to the base. Now there is this little, the little weird invisible guy, that can. What's his name?
Rook.
Yeah, he's like a scary little guy. I'm not a big fan of him. He's almost like something you would see in the Hunger Games or something like that. Like he seems like not a Star Wars character.
He's the Nagri. They were really cool in the Legend stuff. I hope they get brought in somewhere because they play a really big role.
Thrawn uses them in
like
Heir to the Empire trilogy.
Yeah, like his personal bodyguards and security. And, so yeah, I like them.
Yeah, I think I don't know. It's the way they look. Something about him. I'll show him on screen.
But he's very different than I ever pictured him reading the books, for sure.
Yes, they're like so disproportional, and I just can't handle it. Like they're very disproportional. Now here, this is another little foreshadowing that we obviously get here. Kanan is like not being the usual Kanan. He gives Ezra some wisdom, some serious wisdom.
This is where it starts to raise some red flags.
He gives him the "May the Force be with you" and goes on his own. Like that's that's never gonna go well in Star Wars. But here we are.
In the future.
What do you mean?
I hate to break up the moment, but we gotta keep moving. Magnetic climbers. They'll stick to the dome surface.
But of course, something like Goofy in between it with the magnetic climbers. See if we can get it here.
6 levels down. Hera should be...
I know where she is.
All right. We'll get the ship. Signal us when you're ready.
Ezra, Sabine. May the Force be with you.
Then they play the Force theme.
Yeah.
And crud.
And he just tells Ezra, like, hey, you're a good listener. You've learned well. It's going to serve you well in the future. You're like, wait, what? Why does this sound? Why does this sound like a goodbye right now? Yeah. And so at this point, you're like, okay, Kanan's not just getting ready to save Hera. Like he obviously knows something now that everybody doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this episode is it becomes so much clearer as the episode goes on, and all your suspicions begin to be true.
But then at the same time, they just keep doing this thing with us. So you go back here. Sabine has been truth serumed like Leia. And she's like, oh, Kanan's here. And then she's like messing around with the stormtroopers like, oh, I wonder how he's going to get you, stuff like that. And then it's Goofy again, right? So
it is, yeah.
I wonder how he's going to get
in. So good. Magnetic clamps. So then it just goes back to normal Rebels. So I don't know. Yeah. Like they do a really good job pacing this back and forth between the fun, lighthearted adventure and then the serious thing. So they break out and they're always they're just stopping here and there. It's like, oh, there's something important that I got to tell you. And so they keep they'll take you to the fun and then they'll take you back to the serious. And so this is one of those little moments here.
I hate your hair.
It's the best I could do without a mirror.
Your hair hasn't been this short since we first met.
That reminds me. I brought you a present.
A present?
So, it's goofy, but then it's another one of those, oh, well, your hair hasn't been this way since we first met. And now we're last meeting. I don't know. I think they really, now, when this happened, when I saw it the first time, I had no clue Kanan was going to die in Rebels, by the way.
And is this where he starts to try to tell her something? He's like, I have something to tell you. And then they get, is that later?
That's later, right?
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
No,
I can remember.
Like this one.
Kanan.
Yeah, that's later on. So that's towards the end.
Right.
But yeah, we go back into the Goofy stuff here. So it's Price and Ezra, Sabine.
Sneaking in.
And then the little weird guy chasing him here. Here he is right here. Look at him. Is he not just the scariest thing? Look at that face.
Imagine turning around and seeing that thing following you.
Yeah, kids would have been terrified of him. And the fact that he can go invisible, come on now. That's even more terrifying. Does he do that in this episode or just the next one and other ones? I know he does in the next one. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's later on, when he's ambushing them at their camp and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because then Ezra's got to take care of him. But you get Kanan, you get Hera. They're making their escape. Weird little guys chasing them.
With any luck, Ezra and Sabine are finding us a better ride.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of want to try those.
You would.
I love also that she's like semi like laughing gassed this whole time.
Still a little
like it plays into the kind of the humor. Yeah. Pretty funny. But yeah, then the little dude pops up. So we do get a little bit of combat here.
Oh, that's where he was gonna say something.
Yeah. Yep. The vibro blade. What do you think about the Rebels lightsabers? Like, I know that's kind of like a hot button topic for people, whether they like the real thin style or not. I enjoy it.
It doesn't bother me. I like the way it goes. I mean, the choreography in Rebels is so fast. Like, they move really snappy, quick movements. I think it looks good with that. I don't know. Honestly, the width of the lightsaber blade's not ever something that made it or broke it for me.
Yeah, I just think it's so unique, right? Like, because everywhere else we see it, it's not.
It's definitely got a different feel to it, for sure.
And like when they wave on the animated, they almost like get wider too. Like just the way the art on it looks. I'm a big fan of it. Yeah. Also, that's like the coolest lightsaber in all of Star Wars. Kanan's is. It's such a good one. So, Kanan's fighting the weird little dude. Then, of course, you see the good guys coming in. Make the rescue there. Weird little guy doesn't quite get him. And we think, hey, we've made it, right? That's where it has us going. We've beat the bad guy. We've made it. Let's get over to the fuel reserves because that's a good idea, right? So, like, I feel like that's another little reminder, like, hey, we're going to these explosives over here.
Yeah. I wonder how much Kanan knows about what's actually going to happen, or if he just has a sense. Because they go over those fuel pods, and there's a scene where he gets up top, and he's just like looking around, like he's expecting something. Like he's like, "Is this it? Like, is this where something happens?" Like, I don't think he knows exactly how this is going to play out, but I think he's waiting for something. So I think it's more of a sense of what he knows is going to happen rather than knowing exactly how things will play out. So it's really interesting to see that in hindsight.
When you get this sense, I mean, all along for the episode leading up to this, like that he kind of knows what's going to happen anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like it does make sense. But I think this is what you're talking about here.
Oh yeah.
He's looking there. Hera runs up to him.
I know what to say now.
And they've kept talking about like, hey, I've got something I want to tell you. That's like the classic, and you keep building up to it. What do you want to say? What do you want to say? What do you want to say? And then here it is. She finally delivers it.
I love you.
Must be the truth serum talking.
Must be the truth serum talking. I love that. Like, again.
Still joking.
Yeah, still joking around, very Rebels. But at the same time, like, as soon as she says that, you're like, oh, this is not going to end well. Yeah,
let's have this emotional moment that defines the relationship between these two people and how they feel at each other right before we just blow him up.
Again, I mean, I feel like this is traumatic for kids.
Thanks, guys.
So they get the big kiss here. Big scene. And then, here we go. They're all going to get away. Everything's going to be okay, right? Like, we think the whole story is good. They've got Hera. They're escaping. And then, no, that's not what happens. We're going to ruin your favorite character, animated character. So you got Price coming in, and is it an AT-AT?
I think it is.
But sir, the fuel.
I gave you a direct order.
So she says, hey.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. So go ahead, blow up the fuel pods. And how like abrupt of a skip is that? They're kissing on top of it, and like a half second later, blow up the fuel pods. And I love that the Walker drivers are like, hey, we kind of need those for this project that you're doing.
Are you sure about that?
About blowing up all the fuel that we have?
Who am I? But that seems like a terrible idea. Right?
Yeah, I mean, resources, right? You're in a war, and it's not going great, right? So, resources. But no, she says target them, and here we go. blows up the fuel pods while they're sitting on top of it. That's like the most Imperial thing, by the way. Just like do whatever at whatever cost to take out the rebels, take out the Jedi. Like they've wanted Kanan gone. The Emperor has, like Thrawn has. The Empire does not want Kanan around.
Yeah,
they don't want the squad there. Right? They want them all gone because they've been a pain in their side on Lothal for quite some time. So
he's the guy
they
that
want them all gone.
Took out the Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah, he did. And so, obviously, you want them gone. What if it cost all your fuel in your project? Doesn't matter. We've got to do something like completely brash to take them out. And that's what they do. And then you get what, is probably, it's a top 2 animated scene in Star Wars for sure.
Yeah.
Kanan goes out and fulfills the Jedi duty. How good is that? Like you get, you see, I love how they built up just how big the flames are too, right? Like they build it up and you realize just how serious it is. So yeah, I think they did a good job, and this happened so quick. Look at that. They definitely let you know that hey, this is probably not a thing that you can just stop and go with, right? So
they're about to get away, and then they hit you with that, and then you're just kind of sitting there waiting, right? Like you know what's happening at this point, but you're just stuck waiting. It's really great.
And then this is the scene.
Yep.
He just got her suspended there. She's looking at him. And then you see his eyes. They're not quite green yet, right? Or they don't go back to his bluish green color. You keep focusing on her face. And then he turns back. Pushes her. Gets her to the ship. He can see again. How cool is that? That's just so... That's so good there that they threw that in, because is it the Bendu that taught him that he could do that? Is that how that works?
Yeah. Yeah, he's the one who helped him begin to see again after he was blinded.
Yep. And so then you get there, like he's actually the last thing he's getting to see is Hera, who just said that she loves him, right? So super cool to see that. And then obviously
she sees that too. I like that she sees and recognizes it, because she also knows that he sees her in that moment.
Yeah, and then you get, obviously what's going to happen next. Sends him away. Whole thing blows up. Pretty big blow up too, right? So
makes a big.
They don't leave. You know how sometimes we question, like, did he really die? Did he survive?
Yeah, there's not much question here.
Yeah,
it's pretty definitive.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. They do a pretty good job with it. It rocks like the Walker. Ezra's like, Sabine, get away. They got to fly away as soon as they can. And then one by one, every one of those things starts blowing up.
Yeah.
Kevin Kiner, I feel like, does a great job with this soundtrack. Like, isn't he the one that does it? The same guy that does like Bad Batch and all the rest of them.
I think so.
Yeah, and builds up really serious music to play up the situation. And then the ending of this Rebels episode is different than the rest of them. And I do think they knew that they just dropped a big one on everybody. So
because it just cuts here.
Yeah.
Like it's just
here's how it
done.
ends. Yeah. Just cuts to the white Star Wars Rebels. Plays that music, and then it goes to the credits.
Yep.
Yeah. And the next episode actually picks up the same way. So I don't know if you did this or not, but I watched the next episode right after it, because I feel like they have to be watched back to back. Jedi Knight and then Doom is right after it, right? Isn't that the one? Yeah. So
which is that's a great follow episode, because you could get to kind of see Kanan's will still kind of
his will lives on.
Force. Yeah, it's really
Now, couple things really. I know we're at the end of the episode, but a couple things I wanted to point out. One, we already talked about the Rogue One Easter eggs. Two, how impressive is it what they do? And now this, I'm not a television expert, okay? So like, again, I don't understand how they write and plan and do all these things, but I do know it has to be a lot harder with like network television, where every single week you've got to have 22 minutes of TV, regardless of the story you're telling. You've got this many episodes, and they're dictating to you, hey, this is it. This is how you're going to do it. I'm sure there's a budget thing to it, but it's more so a number. You just got to get this many episodes on TV,
right,
and fill this time gap for us. So what they do here is they've got, I mean, obviously they know what they're doing with this story, but you've got 21 minutes to tell this story. So you've got to save Hera. You've got to build up an emotional ending for Kanan, which they let take place over really this whole season. They build him up to this, but like, you've still got to do it in 21 minutes. So you go to like The Mandalorian, you go to Andor, you go to any of these live action shows, or really it could be an animated show too on Disney Plus. You've got room to breathe. You can do whatever you want when you want it, just so long as you stay within your budget. And here there's budget plus time. And so I think it's just so impressive what Dave Filoni pulled off with Rebels, Clone Wars, anything where you've just got like, hey, every week we got to have this many minutes of TV, whatever your story is. So that was one thing. I thought that was a pretty cool note there.
Yeah, because when you think back to like how many major moments or instances are in this episode, like to do that in such a short time and it not feel rushed. Like it doesn't feel like this was a sprint to the finish line. But you get all this moving himself beyond to kind of preparing himself and purifying himself and being the Jedi he needs to. And then with moving past, am I a good teacher for Ezra? He kind of moves past that and lets that go. And then with Hera, just having that moment at the end, like how big of a sacrifice that is to go do what he does after having just that moment with her. Like, cause then it's so stuck in your mind what it is that you're letting go. Like all that stuff crammed into one episode is impressive, and the fact that it feels so well paced and doesn't feel rushed. So yeah, I mean, props to how they wrote this episode out, because it is really, really good.
Also, with that, like, say it's 21 minutes. As a portion of it goes to Ezra, a portion of it goes to Hera, like a portion of it goes to Thrawn. It's probably like it's very little time with Kanan. I mean, more than the rest of it. But still, you're probably 15 minutes, 14 minutes that you pulled all that off. So good. So that's one thing. Two, Kanan's legacy from this. So obviously, like there's already some built-in lore to this, right? Obi-Wan Kenobi does this exact same thing. So it very much plays into like, oh, Master Obi-Wan Kenobi did this, and Kanan's doing the exact same thing for his rebels to beat the Empire and for them to survive. So like that's a callback there. You see Luke Skywalker doing that later on in The Last Jedi. I love it, hate it, whatever. It's the Jedi thing that they do, right? So you see that going on there. So that's a cool legacy. And then you see Ezra going on later in this season. Like, okay, Kanan shows him what he's got to do. And so Ezra essentially does the exact same thing with Ron at the end of Rebels. So it's pretty cool to see that kind of going on there.
Well, and Kanan carries so much from like, this thing of watching his master get killed and running and escaping and feeling guilty about not being there. Knows Ezra's watching him die, right? Like, but he doesn't carry any more of that weight of like, am I going to leave Ezra in a bad place, or where am I guiding this kid? Like he leaves him with the perfect example that allows Ezra to go and be a Jedi Knight, right? Like in a lot of ways, you feel like this is kind of also Ezra really moving on from no longer being this kid who needs someone to tell him how to do it, what to do, because he's always looked to Kanan. And you see this over the next couple episodes where he really struggles with that. But without this example of what a Jedi looks like he doesn't have that resolution at the end of the show, where he's resolved to go and do this thing that's going to save everybody.
Yeah.
And so, it's such a cool thing because they have these kind of bookends where, Kanan's there when his master dies, and now Ezra's here when his master dies. But he's turned it into something beneficial that allows Ezra to go on and be better for it, which is cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then you also get like Ezra, it kind of plays into this, but he gets to revisit this scene as well in the World Between Worlds. And Ahsoka lets him know, like, no, Kanan was exactly where he needed to be, right? Like, we can't take him from this because this was the plan, right? Like, this is how it had to go. And I think that helps, like, really digs Ezra in as well. Like, no, okay, I see how this works. The Ahsoka, falling in after the Darth Vader fight, that's kind of the one off. That's her story.
Right.
But Kanan was where Kanan needed to be at this time, and they've really protected that a lot. Like as far as all of Star Wars goes, like they've thrown in young Kanan, right? They've thrown in Caleb Doom in the Bad Batch. And then you get his voice in Rise of Skywalker. You see his little picture in the cockpit of the Ghost and Ahsoka, but I think it's also because Freddie Prinze Jr. is so adamant that they protect this role as well. Like,
which is cool.
You can't add any more to him. Like, you can't do Force Ghost Kanan. You can't do like flashback Kanan. Like, that needs to be final. And I do like that this scene is pretty final for Kanan, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the significance of his sacrifice, right? Is that it is full.
Yeah.
Like, it's completely moves him. The things I really like about, you're talking about just being in the right place. Because, I don't think Kanan normally has that level of force power, right? That level of strength in the force. And so there's, within the legend stuff, there's a few times where a few Jedi, like they find this place where they're like one with the force. Like they're right where they need to be. And instead of using the force, they're just like a conduit for it. And so I feel like this is Kanan's moment for that, where he's not using the force, but he's where he needs to be. He's in the right spot at the right time, and he's just completely one with the force in this moment, which allows him to just be so much stronger than he would normally be. That's such a cool thing. I'd like to see more of going forward. It happens rarely in the legend stuff, but it was a thing. This idea that you'd find yourself so centered in the force that you were just so much more connected to it than you normally are, which to me in my head, that's where Kanan is here, because to be able to hold back that explosion, like that's such a significant feat. And so I feel like he's got to be like in a special place right there with the force. But
no, there may be something there. Also, do you think anything has to do with like Lothal, right? Because Lothal is a very force heavy place too, like with that old Jedi temple there. Do you think that's a type of thing where it's like almost like a convergence or something like that? Because doesn't the Emperor say something about that? Like, or they make mention that the Emperor is aware that something's gone on with the Force with Kanan's death there? Like, I feel like they say something about that later in Rebels. They kind of mention something along those lines, like something big happened with Kanan's death. I'll have to look that up. Maybe not. But I feel like they do play some bigger force significance there. Like when he died, there was a ripple or something like that. So I think I like that idea.
That would make sense. Like, 'cause if he's so centered in the force there to the extent that like his presence, like not him, right? It's not Kanan that comes back as this wolf doom, right? Like it is this wolf, and it's like this separate thing, but it's also really kind of motivated by Kanan's will to protect Ezra, which is such a cool thing. That it passes like even into the cosmic force, that part of Kanan's still there. And so there might be something to that, right? That like his passing into the force in such a significant way. I don't know. The Emperor does have a lot of interest in Lothal, so
he does. Yeah, he does. Now here's the thing I don't know if you've picked up on. Maybe you have, but I think it's safe to say neither one of us are fans of The Rise of Skywalker. There's okay scenes in it, but it's my least favorite Star Wars movie. I'm on the record for that. But when all those Jedi are talking to Rey at the very end, right? Like she's just trying to hear from them the whole time, and it's cool. That's a good payoff in that one, right? She wants to hear from them, and then she does at the end. That's a pretty cool payoff. Now. You've got a pretty good list of Jedi for the most part. There's a few odd ones in there, but you've got like Anakin, Luke, Yoda, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan talks. You've got like Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan talking. Mace Windu, I think I said. Ahsoka. You've got, who are the two odd ones? Luminara, was she in there? And then Adi Gala or something like that. Like,
no. Who?
No, he was just in the Acolyte.
Yeah. I can't think of his name right now. I know you're talking
about. But Kanan's in there, right? So you've got Kanan amongst those voices. Now, as all of those voices are going through, I think it's a really well written scene. Like they're telling Rey, rise, 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 right? Because the movie's Rise of Skywalker, and so you've got like Anakin giving lines that make sense, and Obi-Wan's following back up on his Rey. These are your final steps, because he starts off in the Force Awakens with these are your first step. So like good pays off there. Yoda's given some wisdom, all that, and you build up, and obviously Luke Skywalker is going to be the last voice she hears, where he says like, Rey, the Force will be with you always. But who's the next to last voice that she hears before Anakin?
Is it Kanan?
It's Kanan.
Is it
Kanan
really?
says like, Rey, a Jedi's strength, like a Jedi finds her strength in the Force, or something like that. Whatever his lines are, but it's Kanan, and then it's Luke Skywalker is the last one before him. Which I think, who knows why they made the decision to go, the way they did with how all those voices go through. But I do think in my head, it lends a little credence to just how big Kanan actually is. Like, I think if you're the guy who's talking right before Luke, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, he's after Yoda before Luke. So pretty cool. I don't know. Fun fact.
Yeah. I mean, if you just want to go by just sheer like cause and effect, I mean, Thrawn eventually gets taken out of the picture ultimately because of Kanan starting this thing. And you got to think, if Thrawn's around during the rest of the rebellion, like, I don't think they win. Right? I think he's a pretty significant tide turner there. And so, I mean, even just from that standpoint, like, he allows Luke Skywalker to be the guy that rises up and takes down the Empire. Without that, I mean, I think Thrawn gets a stranglehold on the rebellion and chokes them out. I mean, I don't know.
Well, and you also get all eras of Star Wars. I may be talking myself into liking the Rise of Skywalker. You get all eras of Star Wars. You get all eras of Star Wars getting a final say in Palpatine going down. I think that's cool, right? So you get the Clone Wars with Ahsoka, you get the Jedi, you get the original trilogy, prequel trilogy, and then you've got Rebels thrown in there too. And so I think that's an important thing that it's in there, whether I like the movie or not. That's a nice touch. That it's not just like, hey, Rebels isn't this thing over in the corner. Like, no, when Palpatine actually goes down in canon, the hero from Rebels played a part in that too, and I think that's pretty cool. So, Kanan's got a pretty cool legacy. His lightsaber hilt is the coolest one in the galaxy. I think we're probably going to have some stories about his son later to come, right? So we're going to see that legacy keep on going, most likely. I think that's cool. I think paying homage to quite a good character.
Yeah, and in Ezra too, right? Like, continuing with Ezra, that's also Kanan's legacy. So it'll be fun to see him and whatever they do with Jason. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, they're going to kill Ezra off. But Jason, on the other hand, it'll be interesting to see how they handle him, because he can't be around come Resistance time. But
it's true.
Either way, and you kind of got an end to this story. But I think this is for sure top 2 animated episode. So if you've been here hanging around in the chat with us, watching this premiere, we appreciate you stopping by. As always, let us know what you think about Jedi Knight in the comments. And then next week, we're going to take a little jump into the Clone Wars. You want to go Siege of Mandalore, or you want to go finale?
Ooh. We'll go in order. Let's start with the Siege of Mandalore.
All right, so we'll go Siege of Mandalore. Next week we'll go finale. Then we'll go maybe another Clone Wars, maybe not. We'll go Bad Batch to wrap up animated month. I think that'll be fun, talking about some of the greatest episodes. We can for sure get a couple Bad Batch episodes in there, I think. Yeah. So that's where we're going. Otherwise, thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys next time.